You're listening to the Business and Life Podcast, where 7 days a week, proven entrepreneurs share their success stories, failures, and give you true value on how you can build a great business and an awesome life. With your host, Mike Olivas.
All right, Matthew, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
You got it. Is it Matthew or Matt?
Matthew.
Matthew it is. You got it. So I don't want to sound like your mom if some people want to say, hey, it's Matt, so I get it. So
Good.
tell our listeners a little bit about, something interesting about yourself, Matt.
Sure. I guess I met my wife when I was 17 years old in boarding school back in Connecticut on the East Coast. We've been together ever since.
Awesome.
And my wife introduced me to my now longtime 10-year business partner that she had grown up with in Connecticut as well, Luke Taylor.
Oh, wow. Talk about things happening for a reason, huh?
That's right.
That's awesome. Good for you. I don't hear those stories as much, and you're a young guy, so I don't hear those stories as much from the younger demographic of people that I interview. So that's really awesome, and hopefully inspirational to some of those single peeps out there like me that they're still out there, right? So what does tell me a little bit about what your company does, the name of the companies, and also what kind of value it brings to the marketplace, Matt.
Yeah, definitely. So 3 companies all sort of underneath the umbrella of BondIt Media Capital. BondIt Media Capital provides access to exactly what it sounds like, capital in the media space. So film, television, sports, music, digital content. After the credit crisis in 07, 08, a lot of the banks that used to provide capital and entertainment exited the space, or I said another way, they were regulated out of the space because of the risk that a lot of that requires. Wow. And simultaneously, technology was changing pretty quickly. Digital camera technology and editing technology was really happening almost at the exact same moment. And so this huge spike of content creation occurred at that time. So for reference, about 5,000 feature films are now produced a year on an international basis. And the majority of them fall beneath $3 million gross budgets. And so there's this huge market opportunity to finance that content, but you have to be able to access the market. And you have to have the expertise of production. And so we were right place, right time to build that company. BondIt has now financed about 325 motion picture and TV deals, ranging from big films that Roland Emmerich's movie Midway that was at the box office this year.
I just watched that. That's awesome.
Yeah, and then Loving Vincent, the Vincent van Gogh animated film that was nominated for an Oscar in 2017, all the way down to smaller made-for-TV content.
Yeah.
So that's really the engine of what we do. Buffalo 8 is a sister company. Luke and I founded Buffalo 8 when we were in college. Buffalo 8 is a production, post-production, and a management company in content, so film and television. We've produced about 40 feature films and some television as well with people like Spike Lee, and had things at Sundance and Cannes and the Berlin Film Festival. And that company, again, we founded it when we were 20 and 21 years old. That company today has about 14 employees. And it was really the catalyst for us seeing the capital opportunity with BondIt.
Yeah.
And today really still acts as just a great both security measure for having a big finance business, but also it allows our clients to never view us as just bankers or finance guys, but guys that started on the production side, care about the creative, and actually are involved in the boots on the ground logistics of producing content. And then the third company is we own a business called ABS Payroll. ABS is a 30-year-old entertainment payroll company in Burbank here in LA. ABS processes payroll, which is probably the least sexy part of the entertainment business, but a tremendously profitable and tremendous pipeline. Again, for reference, ABS will process payroll for about 700 feature film and television projects this year alone.
Wow.
So just a huge amount passing through the business that gives visibility into those projects and relationships to the rest of our ecosystem.
I was going to say, the ecosystem that you built is all connected, and that sounds awesome. But I wanted to really point out something that you mentioned that I love to always point out to listeners, not just a story, but the idea behind the story that you had. To me, it sounds like you find an opportunity when everyone bails out. Like everyone bailed out of the financing world, right? And I think it's the scariest thing to do because there's a reason why they're bailing, but it creates that opportunity for people that either have the know-how or sometimes the guts to jump in and say, how do we find out? Because the need doesn't go away. Just the resources have gone away, right? It sounds like. So if it wasn't you, if it wasn't your company that were to start out, if it wasn't BondIt, for example, initially, or Buffalo 8 maybe, is it who was funding those films? Was it because those didn't stop either? They may have slowed down, but they didn't stop. So was it VCs? Was it just private investment banks? What was going on?
Yeah, up until 07, 08, banks were in, and I'm going to use a lot of terminology that's entertainment specific, but single picture financing, where it is exactly like it sounds.
Yeah,
a lot of banks were in that space. Regional banks, merchant banks, but also places like JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs had capital in a film fund, and hedge funds had a lot of capital in the space. So it was institutional money, it was bank capital. And then there were also, prior up to 07, 08, there was a lot of, let's just call it what it is, there was a lot of dumb money that was willing to take a crazy gamble on motion picture deals. Maybe they had crazy returns coming from other asset classes and they were willing to roll the dice.
Yeah,
that changed in 07, 08. And not only did those folks bail out of the space, but simultaneously it grew exponentially, the amount of content that was being produced. So the opportunity was so glaringly open that us and a handful of other companies sprouted up, and others, well-capitalized individuals as well, sprouted up to fill that void. But the void changed. All of a sudden, a $10 million piece of content can now be produced for $2 million. And so the flexibility you need as a financier, it really comes back to sort of that entrepreneurial ethos you need to build within the business, and to have the capital expertise to, at the end of the day, none of these investors want to lose money. And we have institutional investors. We're half owned by a large public finance company. They want to make money. They're not looking to rub elbows on a red carpet. It became about how do you balance both sides of that world. And we've been able to survive by building a team and building a culture that can look at both sides of the coin.
How has streaming changed the world? I mean, how have you had to either pivot or adapt? I mean, nowadays, not only, obviously the Netflix and the Hulus and everyone out, and obviously the Amazons, and everyone's creating their own, their own movies and content, and it just appears just big screen. How has that changed your guys' model?
A lot. I mean, I think I'll use an analogy, the rising tide will lift all boats.
Yep.
It's had a huge effect, and not to, go too deep on this water metaphor, but the ripple effect is gigantic to the rest of the entertainment business.
No, it's irrelevant, right?
And so in many ways, we've produced content directly for Netflix where they fully finance. So we did the Rodney King project that Spike Lee directed. Netflix fully financed that. On the Buffalo 8 side, She's Gotta Have It, Spike rebooted a very famous early film of his career into a television format. It's a great example of, without a streaming platform, I don't know if that opportunity happens.
Right.
From a financing perspective, most of those places are so well capitalized, they don't need outside capital. They may go and do a big bank syndication deal. So you've got places like Netflix that will go raise, $1 billion of debt from JP Morgan and Bank of America and Union Bank, who are notorious now in sort of this higher echelon entertainment finance sector. Those deals right now are not really accessible to us, not because we don't see them, but because the pricing that Netflix needs doesn't match what the hurdle return that we want. So I think it's had an impact in the sense that they're financing internally, but because they're buying so much content, other places have to compete, whether that's someone like Hulu or whether it's someone like a Lionsgate or a Roadside Attractions or even a smaller company like an IFC, an independent film company.
Right.
These companies have to compete, and so they're out there having to buy more content, which gives us more of a financing and a production opportunity.
Yeah, because I just was wondering why they would even finance something. Are they just raising debt? I mean, you would think a big company like that, like a Netflix or obviously or Hulu, it's creating films, or Amazon's can just cash flow this, right?
Yeah, I mean they are. I think the issue for them is content's really, really expensive, especially the kind of content that these guys want to make. Like you look at The Crown, for instance, that's $100 million, $120 million per season.
Wow.
So you have to, yes, they are well capitalized, but for anyone, that's a serious amount of money.
You got to so you got to go out there and find, for lack of better terms, cheap money. And if you can find it, go out there and get a small percentage on it and cash flow it that way. Because you're going to have simultaneously another dozen projects coming out. Just by being a consumer, seeing how many things are coming out on a regular basis.
Crazy.
It's crazy. And I mean, I'm just something, maybe I'm an old soul, but I mean, if it's, I watch Seinfeld pretty much all day, every day. It's like
phenomenal.
It's an awesome show, and it's like way beyond its time, before its time. But I watch that daily. But again, I know there's so much stuff coming out, and there's obviously some great things out there, but people's voice are being able to heard, which obviously is great for business, for your guys' world, right? That's awesome.
Correct.
So tell me a little bit about, you've gone through some entrepreneurial journeys here. You got a few companies under your belt that are obviously working in progress. You've built the systems around it. Tell me a time where you felt you were close end or hit rock bottom, Matthew, and felt like, you know what, I had to really overcome this challenge. What was that challenge like?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think we've experienced it many times. Again, I think I'll give a few examples. I've had to part ways with a number of friends that were friends before they joined our businesses.
Yeah.
And that was a challenge. I mean, I think when you're super young and you're sort of figuring out how does the company work, what are people going to do? How are they going to fit into their roles? How are you going as a company to sustain an environment? You don't really know anything when you're 23, 24, 25 building. And I had friends that wanted to come and join, and they were well-intentioned, and I would like to think I was well-intentioned in letting them come and join. Ultimately, I've lost a handful of friendships that you probably won't rekindle those friendships, because I think life sort of moves on. But you have to sort of look at it and say it was probably for the best, and ultimately the business had to make the business decision. So I think losing friendships and relationships that pre-existed the business have been tough. The second is early days, we weren't diversified with the multiple companies, and now there's a staff of like 40 some odd people across the three businesses. Early days, it was a couple of guys with some laptops in small spaces. We weren't diversified, so we would be very tied to income and revenue from specific opportunities. And we had one project in particular that was sort of a all eggs in one basket scenario, and that basket tipped over, and we were left sort of in a position where a full quarter of revenue disappeared and went poof, and we hadn't been diversified broadly at our base. That really, and then we were 25 years old. Yeah. And so that led us to realize, okay, we need to be a heck of a lot smarter. We need to have a lot of irons and a lot of different fires. And we ultimately need to be, I know you don't want to try and be all things to everyone, but we need to be multiple things to this ecosystem, because ultimately you sort of look at what Amazon is. It's ultimately a business with a tremendous number of funnels that feed a revenue machine. And we sort of look at this business and say, we have found ways to sell multiple services and multiple opportunities to the same client, oftentimes on the same projects. And that's been really important. And I think that was one of those moments at 25 years old that we sort of said, there's no money going to be coming in for the next few months unless we make some drastic changes to the business. And in retrospect, it was probably one of the best things that could have happened to us.
Sure.
It made us a lot smarter. It made us much better business owners. And then the last big entrepreneurial journey I'll say is we raised money from a public finance company. Yeah. And then we closed a $30 million credit facility on top of it. That broke down the relationships internally amongst us as team members, because you're dealing now with institutional money. You're dealing with the expectations of very sophisticated investors. And we founded Buffalo 8 from a table in a college apartment. And it's an amazing thing, and it's an amazing story to have.
Life Nation, we're all striving towards different goals. Maybe your goal is to finally quit the 8 to 5 grind, quit your job, or take the next step with your existing business. Whatever the goal may be, regardless of your reasons, if you are serious about taking the next step and finally trying to build the life that you deserve, the life that you want to live, take the leap of faith. Go to michaellevis.com and let's discuss your goals and life. It's 100% free. There's no obligation. It's michaellevis.com. Schedule a quick call. I'd love to help.
But the stress that it put you through to get the business into an investable shape was really hard. And then closing that transaction, because ultimately, unless you're Facebook or Amazon or Google or Apple, you really don't have leverage, right? There's always a bigger dog, especially when it comes to the world of financing. And there are a lot of financiers that are scared of hearing the word film finance or media finance. And so it became critical for us to build a brand and a culture that was, one, diversified, two, driven way more about we are professional finance minded first, then we are creatively entertainment minded second. And that dual existence was really difficult when we were out there raising capital internally as a management team, because you need the investment bankers and the CFO minded folks running this company here at BondIt, but you also need the other side of that coin. And so that was that was 2 years of our life raising and closing that deal. And then I've been in the fundraising business since I was 21 years old. And 31 now. I haven't stopped having to be in that mode of constantly raising capital.
If you had to do it again, Matthew, would you still bring in your friends?
I think I would. Yeah, I really do. I mean, I think I would. I think you don't learn. I mean, look, I think there's I read it recently. It was there was an article recently, talking about how most students, through grade 10, there's no direct correlation between performance from kindergarten through grade 10 to later success in life, meaning most people's brains haven't yet developed enough to have context and reference to the information they're being taught. So the kids that perform really well through grade 10 are just really good at listening and regurgitating that information back. And the kids that don't do really well haven't yet developed the context and curiosity. And so you've got this indirect, non-correlated system that I learned from experience. I learned from it happening to me. I was an okay student, but I became a phenomenally creative and curious person, which led to all of this. Right. And I don't think you could have predicted or seen that from my performance from kindergarten through grade 10. Right. And just as you ask, would I bring in my friends? I think you don't learn unless you do it. So for instance, there are job openings recently here at the companies in different ways. And we now have family members and friends coming out of the woodwork saying, hire me. And the answer is just very easy. It's just no. It just makes no sense. It'll you know where it's going to end. Right? There's a great Woody Allen line, like all relationships in business, it starts with enthusiasm and optimism, and like all relationships in business, it ends with the attorneys sharpening their spears. Yeah. And so you've got to prepare for that.
So really the answer to that question seems to be more like you would do it again because it was a learning process. That was a stepping stone to understanding exactly what to do and what not to do. And that's just, I guess processes and failures 101 when it comes to growing a business. Why do you think there are businesses or entrepreneurs out there, Matthew, why do you think that there's entrepreneurs out there that actually not fail but give up on their businesses?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably a lot of reasons, right?
Sure.
I think starting a business at a really young age is such an advantage because your overhead's so low. You have so much unbelievable energy and optimism and naivety that helps power you through a lot of those early moments when, if you're a more seasoned, intelligent person, you probably say, shit, this doesn't make a lot of sense. I should back it up and go home. Right. I think so starting it young is an advantage, especially if someone starts a business at 40, 50, 60, not to say some of the best businesses in the world have been founded by founders at that age. They have. But your life is so different, right? You've got a mortgage, you've got kids, you've got school payments, you've got a totally different overhead. And that's very real if you've got no income coming in. So I think a lot of people give up because of just let's just say little logistical reasons of starting and running a business. And I think the second is people think when they read business news and they listen to podcasts and so on and so forth, that all of it happened overnight. This business was not a sustainable business to this degree for 10 years. Like it was a 12-hour, 5-day a week, and then on the weekends, at least 10-hour work week every single week. And it has to be your life. So I think if you don't have the incredible passion for what you're doing, at some point it's going to be easy to make the decision to give up. Whereas for us, and I'd like to believe for the larger team that I have here as well, it's in your DNA. Like, what else are you going to go do? This is who you are. Giving up isn't an option because it's a fundamental part of your personality. Yeah. Your hobby and the things you enjoy are involved in your business. And that's the entertainment business and tech and other industries have that advantage where what else are you going to go do? It's just about how do you fix it? How do you pivot it? So to me, it's the logistical piece. People give up a lot. Yeah. Or it's the fact that the passion's not going to fuel you through those rough periods. Right.
Because you got to be incredibly passionate and or excited about something. If not, then any logical person's going to say, what am I doing?
Correct.
And it's easy to bail out from there. How are you built these companies, you have several employees. What is the end game for you, Matthew? Is it you built the life that you want to live now? Are you kind of like, hey, this is good, you've become the visionary? Or for our listeners, for example, they're grinding, they're working different businesses or they still want to start one. What does the end game look like for you? And what have you kind of set for a goal for that to be? What's the light at the end of the tunnel for you?
It's a good question. And we've been approached to roll the businesses up, to sell them. Right. We've been approached in all kinds of different variations. I think right now it is about, I feel that it's the tip of the iceberg with the market opportunity. Just as you're saying, how is streaming going to impact it? I think the real answer is no one knows shit. Like truly, no one knows what that impact is going to be.
There's no data on. There's no historical data on it. How are you going to just create those? Yeah, exactly.
I mean, they've literally turned upside down the way we consume content. And that in turn has turned upside down how much content needs to be produced, which in turn changes the entire pipes of how this business is structured. So I think it would be way too short-sighted to think about, okay, well, we've built something, let's just go and hire an investment bank and sell it and you cash out. I think number one, after you pay 50% taxes on selling your business and so on and so forth, what was the point of selling it unless you're getting some ridiculous multiple? I think that's number one. So to us, that's not really in our sights. The second is, do you sell pieces of it into someone else's enterprise? We've been offered, and people have kicked the tires on that, but we pride ourselves, Luke and I, we've never worked for anyone. We don't want to work for anyone. We think that we've been able to power something pretty awesome from an early age. And it's tempting when someone will say, hey, I'll give you X amount of resources and runway. But to me, it's about, I love the building. The journey it's scattered with a lot of skeletons along the path, but it's a battle, and that's part of the fun. I think you end up coming to enjoy the process of the daily fight of it equally as much as the content and the creative side of it as well. So to me, but the end game at some point is you build a true 360 media company. Like, we all recognize that we consume content in so many mediums, and storytelling, different stories are fitted to different mediums better than others. Right. I think podcasts are a perfect example of that. And so I think to us, until we've really built a real 360 loop where we don't have, where we have everything under that umbrella, we're not even close to being where we want to be. So TV is a big horizon for us. Podcasts a big horizon for us. Digital content's a big horizon. So I think there's, we're I know it's very cliche. We're truly feeling like we're just getting started. Yeah. And if 10 years from now I was asked this question, I hope I feel the exact same way.
Right. Yeah. No, I think it's like that question either goes one way or the other when I ask entrepreneurs that, Matthew, and it's either going to be exits or build it to exit, but You said something that makes sense. Like, you don't want to work for anybody. And much of these acquisitions, that's what happens for 2 to 3 years. You have to definitely either still perform or hit milestones. And it's like, why not you hit your own milestones, right? As long as you're not going hungry, what's the point? Why are we going to do that? Let's keep growing this thing. And if you're not, and I've been in that position too, and just still even currently, and it's kind of that, I'm good. Like, I really enjoy it still. If I didn't enjoy it, then I can be really motivated at that point to take a ticket out. But a lot of times, man, too, is that, like you said, when people that I've either interviewed and or those that I've even listened to interviews on different podcasts, it's like when they do sell, they're so lost in life. Like, what do I do? Right. And I think a better position for a CEO and owner is to become more, how can I become more hands-off and more visionary based? Because you become more and more on the outside looking in. And it's, if you're in that position now, that's the light at the end of the tunnel for a lot of people, I think, versus a big paycheck that is awesome for a day or two, or some press releases going out and it's awesome. It feels good. Then it's, now what? Right. Yeah. I don't know how much golf you're going to play, but I don't play that much golf. And that sounds really boring to me. I'm going to go stir crazy.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree.
Might as well build something and have some fun doing it. So those listeners, I think it doesn't mean you can't have an exit strategy, and you should definitely have some kind of exit strategy. Maybe it's exiting yourself out of the business where you can become the visionary, right? Or maybe it's something where you do want a paycheck, but as long as you have something in the game, in the kind of in the dugout, if you will, ready to come out and see what's next from a venture standpoint, because you can definitely go stir crazy because you're so used to grinding, and also being a visionary could be an awesome exit as well, or viewed as one. Tell us a little bit about Matthew, or maybe give us some parting advice here. Out of all your successes and your failures and your business, what's the one piece of parting advice you'd give to the business and life listeners listening today?
Yeah, I think a couple things. I was given a great piece of advice. I've been given a lot of great pieces of advice on just the broader thought process about running businesses, starting them, growing them. And I think, by the way, there's a very big distinction between being a founder CEO and then the transition when you become an operating CEO. And then when you become a growth stage and a venture or private equity backed CEO, we've gone through all three of those roles. And I actually love having gone through all three of those roles because I think the skill sets are tremendous value to have in your toolkit. So I think there's nothing wrong with being the head down hustler for a time, micro focused on transactions and building something that spits off some cash, and then start figuring out the more sophisticated, intelligent way to grow your enterprise. I think it's important to lift your head up at a certain point and not become, I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs blow themselves up because they become so handcuffed to the phone and to emails because they are everything to all of their clients. There's no way to scale that business at all. And I was massively guilty of that for years, and still in many ways I'm guilty of that.
Sure.
So how do you distance yourself from being the only vocal, only tip of that business? That's number one. Number two, I do think it's all about people. There's like a very cliche, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And it's very true. If you build a really great culture with people, and it could be you and a co-founder, or it can be you and 1,000 employees, culture will eat strategy all day and night. I think anyone tracking what's going on with Microsoft right now, and it's unbelievable what that CEO has been able to do with really just shifting the culture to an innovation culture as opposed to sort of this know-it-all culture that Microsoft had. I'm not a Microsoft guy at all.
Right.
But this guy has made me at least very respectful admirer of that business in the ability to turn the ship on a 100,000 employee business and become tremendously innovative. That's an insane job. Yeah. So culture eats strategy for breakfast. And then I think the last piece, so one of our shareholders, chairman of the company, a 79-year-old guy, has more energy than both you and I combined, works every single day at his desk, emails answered faster than 25-year-old kids back to me, so engaged. And I said to him, like, what is this secret? And he has a great phrase. And look, maybe I'll feel different when I'm 60, 70, 80 years old. But he says, retirement is practice in getting old. And thinking about exiting a business is practice in getting old. And I'm not interested in that. I want to stay engaged. I want to stay involved. And I think that's an incredible thing for, even now at 31, going on to 32, I've got kids that are 22, 23, 24 years old. They feel like they were raised on a different planet than me sometimes. And so how do you stay engaged and in tune with them? Literally by staying engaged and in tune with them. And I think the world is now moving at such a great clip that you've got to be able to stay involved and not want to just, maybe for some people, they want to kick their feet back and hang out and do nothing.
Right.
I love being ambitious. I think it helps power you through those tough times. And I think you've got to be, again, not wanting to just kick your feet back and do nothing.
Yeah, that sounds cool, but it's not.
Yeah.
It sounds cool for sure, but vacation even gets old, right? And so that's just a week or two tops for some people. So, hey, Matthew, thanks so much for jumping on the show. Thanks for dropping your knowledge here. And where can people find you?
You can find us online, bondit.us or buffalo8.com. On Instagram at Buffalo8Pro, and we're all over social media, and very big fans of marketing like maniacs.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Guy.
Life Nation, you've got to remember that in order for things to change, you must change. And in order for things to get better, you must get better. You just got better by hanging out with me, Michael Libas, and the Business and Life Nation. So come back tomorrow because I'm here dropping sound bombs 7 days a week, baby. If you'd like to subscribe, please do, so you can take action and execute. See you tomorrow.